Now, a quick reminder that for the microscopy lab that we did yesterday, I am not expecting the labels to be correct. Right? I am just expecting that the lab diagrams are in the right format that we talked about the other day. Okay? And that would be that your name and date are in the top right corner, that the diagram takes up an entire page, that your labels all go to one side and end in horizontal lines, that the title is in the middle on the bottom, the magnification is in the middle on the bottom below the title, and the size is in the middle on the bottom below the magnification. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. I don't care what you label everything, right? You could say like purple thing, outside of amoeba, little hairs. I don't care as long as it's in the right format. Okay, we are going to go over the labels for the parts of a cell today, but again, I don't expect that they're correct on this lab. And next lab we do, I do expect them. Okay, because we will be looking in particular at the parts of individual cells. Okay, so this one is just about format, and it was about using the microscope, right? Not about knowing what every part of the cell is or does. All right, so for today, okay, we need to know and understand how plant and animal cells are different, because we've talked about how they're kind of the same. Okay, we need to understand why these differences are present and necessary. Okay, and we need to be able to correctly label plant and animal cells. What would be the key difference, do you think, between how a plant lives and how an animal lives? Yep. One is photosynthetic and the other is not. Okay? It is that is the main reason for the differences between plants, animals, fungi, okay, protists. They're different because they have different ways of getting their energy. Once they have their energy, everything is the same. Okay? The way a plant breaks down sugar, and the way an animal breaks down sugar, the way a fungus breaks down sugar, the way the amoeba, the paramecium, the euglena break down sugars is the same. It's how they get their sugar. Okay? What sugar in particular?
Is it glucose?
It's glucose. Okay? Glucose is the fuel for all cellular respiration. Okay? Other things can be used, but they're not nearly as efficient. Okay? And they usually end off with like byproducts that are not great. Okay? But what we're looking for here is glucose. Animals get glucose by eating other organisms, okay, or at least breaking down tissue from organic beings. Okay? Plants, on the other hand, get their glucose by producing it directly through photosynthesis. Okay? And that requires a lot of different cellular processes and structures. Okay? All right, so we call that your mode of nutrition. How you get to glucose is your mode of nutrition. So, if you're an animal, you eat. Okay? You consume organic material. Sometimes that means you have to kill your food, even a cow. Okay? I mean, if you're a blade of grass and you see a cow come, that would be pretty terrifying because you can't run. Okay? They're a predator. They're very good at hunting grass. Okay? And so they're going to consume it, and it's going to die. And they're going to turn it into glucose and other things that they need. Okay? For us, eating that grass would not only be disgusting, but also useless. Can we digest and produce glucose from grass? Nope, our body can't do that. Okay? It's why if people are trying to like lose weight, okay, that they will consume things that either don't have a lot of caloric potential, like vegetables, okay, like lettuce, okay, things like that. They don't have a lot of calories in them, for us anyway, because we can't break them down. Okay? Or they would consume things that would be hard to break down, like proteins. Okay? You guys have heard like the keto, right? They go all like protein, and because it's harder for your body to break that down, it actually uses more energy to digest it. Right? So these are things that are important if you are an animal or any organism that has to consume organic material for food. What can you consume? consume, what can your body break down and turn into energy. Okay? If you're a plant, you need water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight. And then you're good. Okay? There's no like 4 food groups for a plant. There's 3. And they need all of them. Light, water, carbon dioxide. Okay? If you can give a plant those things plus a few minerals from the soil, they're going to be just perfectly happy. Right? They can produce their own food from that. Okay. So, if we are looking at these 2 processes, okay, this is the process of photosynthesis. Can you guys see the green against the gray? I think that's balanced, right? Okay. What does it kind of look like from our last unit? Yeah, it kind of looks like a combustion reaction, except I hear people whispering it. It's backwards. Right? On a combustion reaction, your products should be carbon dioxide and water. Okay? Photosynthesis is the opposite of combustion. It's what produces the stuff we can combust. I mean, think about, what do you burn? Wood, fossil fuels, which are dead plants. Okay? What you're doing when you combust something is you are releasing all the energy photosynthesis put in to make it. Okay? So when you have a campfire and you're burning, pieces of tree, you are releasing years worth of energy created by photosynthesis. Okay? And when we burn coal, same thing. Okay? Millions of years ago, those plants were alive, carrying out photosynthesis. They died, they got buried, not like a funeral buried, like filled in. Okay? And they were turned into coal. Okay? All we're doing is releasing the photosynthesis that they did 500 million years ago. Okay? Now, here's the other process that goes on. This is what plants and animals do when they get their glucose. Does that look more like a combustion reaction? And it is this reaction reversed, is it not? Okay, so this reaction here is photosynthesis. This reaction here is cellular respiration. Okay? All organisms carry out cellular respiration. Plants, animals, fungi, bacteria, protists, okay? All the stuff you looked at yesterday with the exception of the letter E. Okay, so your amoeba, your paramecium, your euglena, they all carry out cellular respiration. It is how they get their energy. Okay? Plants can make their own. Okay? That's the advantage that plants have. They don't have to consume organic material for food. Okay? They can simply make their own sugar through the process of photosynthesis. This is the first unit of Bio 20. Okay, so if you're registered for Bio 20 second semester, okay, this is the first unit, going through the biochemistry of cellular respiration and photosynthesis. Okay, it's probably the hardest unit in Bio 20. Okay, because you go through all these little things about how and what affect these 2 processes. Okay, we're just going to say these are the 2 processes for here. All right. So, Chemoheterotrophs. We're going to go over 2 modes of nutrition because it's kind of all there is. There's a couple others, but they're really rare. Okay, so chemoheterotrophs are organisms that have to consume organic material from other organisms. Okay, be they living or dead. So a decomposer is still a chemoheterotroph. Right. So if you've got like bugs eating, like dead stuff, okay, that's still a chemoheterotroph. They're still eating the organic material from a once living organism. Okay, so the origin of this word, just so we understand, right? There's chemo means chemicals, okay, organic material. Hetero means other, okay, or many. Okay, so the chemicals from other organisms. And then troughs means feeding. So this is a chemical other feeder. Okay, it means the chemicals from other organisms for food. Chemoheterotroph. Okay. A photosynthetic organism is a photoautotroph. Photo meaning light, auto meaning self, troph meaning feeding. Okay, so it can feed itself using light. Right? A chemoheterotroph needs chemicals from other organisms for food. Okay, and that can be lots of different things. It could be a worm eating the organic material, the humus in the soil. Okay, that was once living organisms. A fungus. Okay, there's all different kinds of fungus. Okay, there's decomposing fungus. There's parasitic fungus. Okay, and they do all the same things. They consume the organic material from other organisms for food. Here's a thought for you. Okay, if you've ever had athlete's foot, okay, or heard of athlete's foot, what is it? It's a fungus. It grows on your feet and your scalp. And what it's doing is eating you. That's why it's itchy. Okay? Athlete's foot is really, really itchy. Okay? And so what's happening with a fungus, okay, all we ever see with a fungus is actually the reproductive part. Okay? The mushroom or whatever, okay, that's the reproductive part of the fungus. The feeding part of the fungus is actually in whatever it's feeding on. And it looks like, at a microscopic level, kind of like roots. They're not really roots, okay, but that's what they look like. What they are, okay, is they're called hyphae. And these hyphae are like a stomach turned inside out. Okay, so these hyphae grow into whatever they're feeding on and secrete the same types of digestive chemicals that are in your stomach. They just secrete them, and it digests the material around them, and then they absorb the food. So their digestion is actually outside of their body. Okay? They just secrete the digestive enzymes, it starts breaking down the material, and they just absorb it through the hyphae. Okay? So if you've got athlete's foot, okay, or the same thing on your scalp, okay, it's itchy because what's happening is your cells are being digested by this parasitic fungus. And if you've ever seen like a bracket fungus growing on the side of a tree, okay, same thing. Right? If the tree is alive, it's a parasitic fungus. If the tree is dead, it's a decomposing fungus. But they're doing the same thing. They're putting their hyphae inside of the wood, okay, and secreting these digestive enzymes that are eating the tree. Okay, so a fungus actually eats other organisms, okay, externally, not internally. Okay, for a worm, okay, they eat the dirt, okay, and they digest it. Okay, if you're a top predator like a shark, obviously you consume other organisms and you digest them internally. Okay, but in the end, the chemical process that goes on here is the same. The material that they consume is converted to glucose and then broken down for energy by cellular respiration. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Are some foods going to be better at delivering glucose than others? Okay. What food do you suppose is easiest for us to break down and turn into glucose? Carbs, yeah. Carbs are the easiest, okay? Because they're carbohydrates, they're sugars, okay? Sometimes they're a little bit longer, okay? But they can be easily broken down into glucose, right? If you like doing distance running and you carbo load, okay, you eat a lot of carbs before a marathon or something like that, you're just putting all of that stuff into your muscles so that it can be readily converted by cellular respiration. Okay, so carbs are the easiest. It's also why they're usually the first thing that gets cut out of a diet, okay, if someone is trying to lose weight, because they're the most easily converted. What's the second most easily converted thing we eat? Fat. Carbs, okay, which includes starches like potatoes, okay, and then fats. Okay? Fats are the second most easily converted food, okay, that we eat into glucose. Those would be the two things you would take out of your diet right away if you were trying to lose weight, because they're the highest energy. Okay? So French fries should be like at the very top of the list for things that would be off the menu if you were trying to lose weight, because they are carbs fried in fat. Okay? You're combining the two most energy, okay, dense things there are. Okay? Proteins and like vegetables would be the least. Okay? Vegetables being the most, the least caloric dense, okay, because we can't break them down. Okay? If I give like lettuce or something like that to a horse or a cow, can they convert to glucose? Why? Why can't we, but they can? Is their digestive system different than ours? How many chambers in their stomachs? 4. Yeah, okay. All ungulates, okay, that would be things with hooves, okay, basically herbivores, have a 4-chambered stomach. Okay, so they eat this stuff, and there's a series of different chemical reactions that go on that break down the cellulose, which is what plants are made out of, into simple sugars that they can then use for energy. Our digestive system cannot do that. If we consume cellulose, all we're getting out of that is fiber. Okay, what does fiber do for you? It helps you poop. Okay, because you can't digest it. Okay, it goes through you pretty much unchanged. Thick corn, okay, goes through pretty much unchanged because we cannot break it down. It's made of materials that our digestive tract cannot break down. Okay, but if you give it to a pig or a cow, no problem. Okay? They could easily convert that because their digestive system works different. Okay? And they often digest their food more than once. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a cow chewing their cud. Okay? They actually vomit up what they've eaten and chew it again and then swallow it. Okay? Rabbits, even worse. They eat their own poop. Because the second time through, they can get even more energy out of it. Okay? There's lots of different ways to get food energy. Okay? I'm not suggesting that you should do that. You definitely should not. Okay? Once it comes out, don't eat it. Okay? As a general rule. Okay? For us anyway. Okay? But for rabbits, that's fine. All right, questions on that? Okay, so chemoheterotrophs, okay, are anything that has to consume organic material from other organisms as food. Okay, so animal cells. Okay, animal cells obviously are designed around being able to break down the organic material from the food we eat. So, one of the big things for animal cells to help with being a chemoheterotroph is that they do not have a cell wall. Okay? Why is that an advantage if you are an animal? If something has a wall, how flexible is it? Not. Yeah. Okay? Having a cell wall would make cells inflexible. Okay? And so the animals would not be able to move very well. Okay? Having just a cell membrane makes the cells flexible so that they can change shape and enable movement, okay? Enabling them to go and acquire their food. Fungi, which are also a chemoheterotroph, have cell walls. They don't move. Okay, they just put their hyphae into other things, so they actually have cell walls. Okay, but animals do not. Most chemoheterotrophs do not. Okay. All right, within the cell, within the animal cell, there are a couple of special organelles that an animal cell has that you won't see in a plant cell. That would be the lysosome. The lysosome is the stomach of the cell. That's where digestive enzymes are stored, okay, so that complex carbohydrates and proteins and things like that can be broken down. Okay? Obviously, we already said the lack of a membrane. Okay? A peroxisome is also an organelle that animal cells have that plants don't. Okay? It's the precursor to a lysosome. Okay? A lysosome is actively digesting food, but a peroxisome is not. It just has the enzymes, but it hasn't started the digestion process yet. Okay? And then cytoskeleton. Okay? That would be all these little things that you see, kind of hash marks that are running all through the cell. Okay? They're kind of like bungee cords, and they're attached to the inside of the membrane, and that allows the cell to flex but not tear. Okay, so it gives it that flexibility, that motility. Cytoskeleton is kind of a bad name because when we hear skeleton, we think bone, and that's hard. Okay, but it's really not. It's just an internal support structure, and that's what the true meaning of skeleton is. Okay, so it is a supporting structure. Okay, so this is a cell. Cyto means cell. Okay, so it's a cell's supporting structure. All right. The other thing, it's not on here, but okay, they are. It's not on this diagram at all. Okay, are centrioles, which we'll get to in a bit. They help the cell when it's time to divide. Plant cells don't need them because plant cells aren't flexible. Okay, so we'll get to that. All right. All right. Next word, photo. Photo means light. Auto means self, and troph means feeding. Okay, so light, self-feeding. So anything that is photosynthetic is a photoautotroph. Okay. There are some organisms that live at the very bottom of the ocean where there is no light that are chemoautotrophs. Okay. They're the ones that can take material from the deep sea vents. Okay, those hydrothermic vents at the bottom, okay, and they can actually feed themselves, okay, convert that into sugar themselves, okay, so it's still self-feeding, okay. They're pretty rare though. So we're just going to deal with photoautotrophs and chemoheterotrophs. So if we're talking about photoautotrophs, okay, what's going on is they're taking the carbon dioxide and water that is produced by animals and fungus and whatever else, they're converting it back into plant material, okay, and glucose, and then, of course, if they get eaten, that can be released. Okay? That's what we call the carbon cycle. So it's these two modes of nutrition that keep the carbon cycle going. Okay? So with photosynthesis, we're taking carbon dioxide and water, splitting them apart. Okay? That's what the energy from the sun does. Okay? Is it allows the carbon dioxide and water to be split apart and then put back together as glucose and oxygen. Okay, anybody need that one anymore? All right, so plants have to have certain specialized structures as well. Okay, one of those things are chloroplasts. Okay? So chloroplasts are little green structures, little green oval-looking things within the cell. When we do our cell anatomy lab, you'll be able to see them very, very clearly within a plant cell. Okay? You will see little kind of grayish-green ovals within the cells that we look at that are very obviously the photosynthetic organ, chloroplasts. Okay? Plant cells also have to have structures that help support them. Okay? There are two things that help support a plant cell and thus a plant. That is the cell wall, okay, which we said animal cells don't have. It makes a plant cell rigid. And a water vacuole. That would be this thing here in the middle. Okay. Now, how many people have ever seen a plant that's wilted? Okay, why do they wilt? What are they lacking? Yeah, okay. If a plant is wilted, it's usually because it hasn't been watered. Okay, if you water it, as long as it's only wilted and not crunchy, okay, will it come back? Yes, it will. Okay, what happens is when a plant gets really stressed for water, a process called osmosis starts to pull water out of the water vacuole. The water vacuole normally is quite full and pushes from the inside against the cell wall. Kind of like if you put a balloon inside of a box and started blowing it up. Okay? Would it push against the inside of the box? Okay? And that could support the inside of the box. It's why they put those air packets. If you've ever got anything from Amazon, they put it in like a giant box, even if it's only this big. And then they throw in all these inflated plastic things. Okay? Well, the inflated plastic things are like what a water vacuole would do, except they're full of air instead of water for obvious reasons. Okay, so inside a plant cell, water is used because water kind of cushions everything, but it also exerts, okay, pressure against the inside of the cell wall that helps support the cell. Okay, if that water vacuole starts to empty, the cell wall is not strong enough on its own to keep the plant firm, and so the plant wilts. Okay, if you water it, it'll come back. Okay, everybody with me there? All right, so we've got the cell wall, and we've got the water vacuole, and we've got the chloroplasts. Everything else is the same as an animal cell, okay, obviously lacking the lysosome, peroxisome, okay, and centrioles, and cytoskeleton. Okay? Don't need a cytoskeleton in plants because that's what the water vacuole and the cell wall do. Now, a little thing about the cell wall. It's not a wall like these are. Okay? It's a wall like in a house that's being built. Okay? So, I mean, you've all seen probably a house being built, right? Before they finish it, it's just framed, and you can walk through the walls, right? You can walk between the studs. Okay? That's what the cell wall is like. It's not a wall, it's a frame. Okay? So that means it doesn't protect the cell from anything. I know somewhere along the way, some well-meaning teacher has told you that the cell wall protects the cell, but it actually doesn't. Okay? It's just a frame that supports the cell. The cell membrane is what keeps things in and out, okay, or checks and makes sure what goes in and out is okay, right? But the cell wall actually doesn't protect the cell at all because it's not a solid wall. It's just a frame. All right. Is this making some sense? Okay, so when it comes right down to it, what we need to remember are chemoheterotrophs consume other organisms for food. As such, they have lysosomes, peroxisomes, a cytoskeleton, and no wall. Plant cells, okay, are photoautotrophs. They carry out photosynthesis. In order to do that, they have chloroplasts, cell wall, and a water vacuole. Okay, everything else is the same. Okay? They both have this big purple thing. They both have this blue stuff, and this blue stuff, and this orange thing, and that orange thing. Okay? They have all of them. We're not going to, we'll go through the real names in a bit, but they all have all of those structures, and they all have a lot of similar processes as well. All right, so if we're looking at these two cells side by side, okay, we've got animal cell on the left, plant cell on the right. Are there a lot of things in common? Like more so than are different, for sure. They both have a cell membrane. Okay, plant cells still have a cell membrane, it's just inside the wall. All right, they both have a mitochondria. That's this thing here. Okay, they would have several of those, in fact. Okay, they both have rough endoplasmic reticulum. That's in this cell, the pink stuff with the blue dots. Okay, in this cell, it's also kind of pinkish purple stuff with dots on it. Okay, around the nucleus. They both have a nucleus. Okay, they both have a Golgi apparatus. That's this thing right here. Okay, they both have cytoplasm. That's the fluid that fills up the cell. Okay, cells are not full of air. They're full of something called cytoplasm. Okay, the reason they're filled with that is it enables the transport of materials through the cell. Okay. Oh, these are the centrioles. These are the things I said that animal cells have that plant cells don't. It wasn't in the other diagram. Okay? And they help with cell division. Okay? And we'll go over that later. All right, so lots of things in common between these cells, more so than they have different. Okay. Questions on that? All right, I would like you guys to answer those questions. Okay, some complete sentence answers. I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll go over them together. So, what's the main difference, or the main reason for the differences between plant and animal cells? 3 words. What would be the 3 words? Modes of nutrition. Yep, absolutely. Okay, that's why there's differences between plant and animal cells. They have different modes of nutrition. How they get their energy is different. Okay? All right. What organelle supplies plants with energy? Mark. It is the chloroplast. What process does it use? Seth.
Photosynthesis.
Photosynthesis. All right. Okay, what organelle supplies animal cells with energy? Nico.
Mitochondria.
Okay, actually, that's true. The mitochondria supplies both plants and animals. I should have been more specific. I should have said which organelle gets the glucose for an animal cell. Lysosomes, yeah. Okay, so yeah, you're right. Mitochondria, totally right, works for both. It's actually what carries out the cellular respiration. But the one that gets us the glucose is the lysosome because it's the one that digests and breaks down the chemicals from organic organisms. Okay? All right, transport within plant and animal cells is done in the same fashion. Why would this have been kept the same from an evolutionary standpoint when so many other things have been altered? So we know plants and animals have a common ancestor way, way back. That common ancestor probably transported materials the same way they both still do. Why do they both still do it that way?
Still works.
Still works. That's how natural selection leads to evolution. Okay? If something works, that organism will be successful, it will survive, it will reproduce and pass on its genes that code for transport stuff this way. Okay? And so, since nothing better has come along, that way is still used. Okay? That's how natural selection works. If something came along that was better, that organism would do better, they would reproduce more often, and the genes that they have for the new transport method would soon appear more and more often until the old method disappears. Okay? That's how, so nature selects for that because it's better. Okay? And then evolution is that gene eventually takes over. Okay? And that's what causes a change. So natural selection is the picking of a particular trait. Evolution is the process by which we see that trait happen more and more often and see the change in a species over time. Okay, so everyone follow the difference? Because sometimes people think they're the same thing. Okay? Natural selection is the mechanism through which evolution happens. Okay, so we, like ourselves, I'm not going to evolve into something else. Okay? My genes might be selected, okay, and then my offspring would have them, okay, and then their offspring would have them, and their offspring would have them, and over several generations, maybe that means that that gene is out in the population more often. That's evolution, but I don't get to see that. Okay, I'm either selected for or against. Okay, which means I'm either successful or I'm not. Okay, does that make sense? Follows the difference. All right, the nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Which would have survived best in a primordial, that would be baby Earth, okay, that had very little oxygen or organic material available? So which evolved first, photosynthesis or the other?
Photosynthesis.
Yeah. Blue, green algae are some of the first things to show up in the fossil record. Okay? They were photosynthetic because they could make their own oxygen, they could make their own glucose from carbon dioxide, which was plentiful, and water, which was plentiful, okay? And sunlight, which was also plentiful. Okay? So that's what evolved first. All right, questions on any of those? Okay, take out your cell diagrams. Okay. So we'll start here at the top. What's this big purple thing? It is the nucleus. Now, somewhere along the way, some very well-meaning science teacher told you that the nucleus is the brain of the cell. And yes, I meant for that to be dripping with sarcasm, because I hate that. Okay? That is so not what the nucleus does. Okay? The nucleus doesn't make decisions. The nucleus doesn't control anything. It is where DNA is stored. If anything, it's a library. That's it. It stores your DNA. That's what the nucleus does. Okay? It is not a brain. A brain is made of many cells. A nucleus is not. So this is not a brain. Not a brain. You write brain of the cell on a quiz or a test, I will give you a 0 on the whole thing. Not really, but don't do that because it's not right. Okay, it's not the brain of the cell. All right, what's the purple dot inside the nucleus? That's okay, I didn't expect anyone to know. It is the nucleolus. If the nucleus is a library, the nucleolus is the librarian. Okay? Your DNA inside the nucleus is like a hoarder's house. Okay? The DNA is everywhere, and it's not organized. It's all just like someone took like a ball of yarn and unraveled it and threw it in a pile. Okay? That's what your DNA looks like inside the nucleus. But the nucleolus knows where all the information is. Okay? So it's like the librarian. It can direct you to that one book amongst the millions of books that are in that library. Okay? So what the nucleolus does is it copies sections of the DNA and sends them out into the cell so that they can be used to make things. Okay? It's how protein synthesis occurs. So the nucleolus copies DNA and it controls protein synthesis because it got access to the DNA. Right? So if your cell needs to make adrenaline, the nucleolus goes and finds the section of your DNA that is the recipe for adrenaline, it copies it, and sends that copy out into the cell to be produced. Okay? That's what the nucleus does. All right, this thing that goes around the nucleus is the nuclear membrane. It is a barrier. The only thing that gets into the nucleus is genetic material. So the nuclear membrane's got those little holes in it. Those are nuclear pores. They open and close, and they allow DNA and RNA in and out. That's all that gets in and out of the nucleus. Okay? So it is a high security facility, okay, where important information is stored and protected. And the nuclear membrane does that. All right. This line right here, okay? This is pointing at the fluid that fills up the cell that is called cytoplasm. Cytoplasm facilitates diffusion. That's transport within the cell. Okay? That's its entire role. Okay? It doesn't keep things floating or anything like that. It facilitates diffusion. Okay, this kind of orangey brown stuff that's got the little dots on it, this stuff is called rough endoplasmic reticulum. Which you can mercifully abbreviate ER. Okay, so that is the rough ER. rough ER primarily transports protein around the cell. Now, this brown colored stuff here, very similar and connected to the rough ER, except it doesn't have the little bumps on it. So if that stuff is rough, this is smooth, right? Okay, so this is our smooth ER. Smooth ER is probably the most plentiful and important organelle in the cell. It never looks that way on a cell diagram. They only ever show like a tiny bit of it like that, but it actually fills up a lot of the cell's volume. Okay? It does lots of jobs. Okay? It helps to detoxify poisons. It helps to break down complex carbohydrates. It helps to make fat-soluble hormones. Okay? It does lots and lots of things. It also repairs any damaged membrane material, which is basically the outside of every organelle and the cell itself. Okay? So it's got a big and important job. All right, now I know I skipped this one, and it's because I have to erase a little bit here. All right, the little bumps on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, that's not the only place they are. It doesn't really show it well here, but they're also sometimes floating free within the cytoplasm, are called ribosomes. Ribosomes are what make protein. So they take that RNA and DNA that the Nucleolus copies, they're what actually turns it into protein. Okay, this yellow thing here, this is the Golgi Apparatus. The Golgi Apparatus is kind of like a garbage man, or sanitation technician is the politically correct term for that. Okay, it packages wastes before they're removed from the cell. It also packages things that the cell is trying to export. So if you have a particular cell and its job is to make insulin, okay, the Golgi apparatus will package the insulin as well as any wastes and move them to the membrane for export. Okay, so we typically say that its job is to remove wastes, but it also helps remove or export material. All right, what's the blue thing? Nico, you were talking about this a minute ago.
Yeah,
This is the mitochondria. Okay. The mitochondria carries out cellular respiration. It's what converts glucose into energy. Okay, now this dot here is pointing, you can see there's a layer inside of the green layer, okay? So that is pointing at that layer, and that layer is the cell membrane. Okay, the cell membrane controls what gets in and out of the cell. Okay? At the high school level, we call that process endocytosis and exocytosis. Cytosis meaning movement, okay? Movement for the cell. Exo meaning out, and endo meaning in. So endocytosis, movement into the cell. Exocytosis, movement out of the cell. Okay? What would the big green layer be? That's the cell wall. Okay, and we said that that's for supporting the cell. Okay, it doesn't protect the cell, it's just for support. All right, what's this green thing? lots of them in there. And they're green. The green part's important.
Chloroplasts.
That's a chloroplast, yeah. Okay? And they've got little things inside them called thylakoids. You're not going to need to know that, but you'll actually be able to see those. When you see the chloroplast, you'll actually be able to see like discs or what looks like stacks of like poker chips inside. Okay, and then this big thing here is our water vacuole. So that's the thing that works with the cell wall to keep and support the cell, keep it rigid, and pushes against it, okay? Using something called Turgor pressure. The pressure of water from within is called Turgor pressure. Now, because there's so much pressure in here, water pressure, there's a special membrane that goes around the outside of it called a tonoplast. Okay, that's it. We got all the parts we have to know in the plant cell. Right, we're going to go over on another day, probably tomorrow, okay, what all the parts do, but we still got to do the animal cell, right? So here's the good news. Are a lot of the parts the same? Yeah, so the animal cell goes a lot faster, okay, because we got a lot of similar parts. Okay, so just a couple things here about the plant cell. They're generally rectangular shaped, but not always. Okay, in certain layers of the leaf, they're very rectangular. In other layers of the leaf, they're a bit more randomly shaped, but generally rectangular. Okay, they're eukaryotic. We talked about that the other day. That means they have a nucleus and other organelles. Okay, there's lots of structures. They're between 10 and 100 micrometers long. All right, so we'll look at some under the microscope, okay, later on, maybe next week, okay, and we'll see them, and that'll be, you'll get about that size, right? And obviously they carry out photosynthesis. All right, so for the animal cells are generally smaller than plant cells, okay? 10 to 30 micrometers, right? Giving you an idea, when you think of how big the euglena was yesterday, animal cells are quite small, okay? So let's start out here. Big purple thing, still the nucleus. Still holds the DNA. That's its job, okay? And I don't know why, but for some reason the nucleolus is not labeled on here. And it needs to be. So we're going to go out from here and go. Was there a line on yours? No, there wasn't. Okay. And then obviously the outside of it is still the nuclear membrane. So okay, pointing at the fluid, what's the fluid called? Cytoplasm. Okay, now we have a new structure. These little yellow kind of gear-looking things. Okay, these are the centrioles. Because an animal cell is flexible, it can change shape while it's in the process of dividing. And that can lead to loss of genetic material. So what the centrioles do is when the cell's about to divide, they migrate to each pole. So if you imagine like the cell had a north and a south pole, they would go there, and they send out these fibers that grab on to all the DNA. And then they pull them in. So if the cell changes shape radically while it's dividing, the centrioles make sure that none of the DNA gets into the wrong half of the cell. Okay? They pull it into the right cell, and then that becomes the nucleus of the new cell. Okay. All right. Orange stuff with the bumps? Rough ER. Right. And and you can just label it rough ER even on a test. Okay, I won't be looking for endoplasmic reticulum. Right, over the little bumps. Ribosomes. Okay, smooth ER is not labeled on here. That's not good. So we're going to draw a line across here and go smooth. Okay, what's the blue thing? That's the mitochondria. Okay, now, point of clarification. There's these two different looking bubbles. They're different colors. Okay, one is slightly larger than the other, and if I was doing a really good job, if I was drawing this, this would have stuff in it, visible like chunks of material in it, because this is a lysosome that is actively digesting food. It's hard to find a cell diagram that actually does everything well. All right, what would the outside of the cell be called? Cell membrane, right. Animal cells do not have a cell wall. Okay, the red dot here is a peroxisome. It will become a lysosome once it merges with a food vacuole. Okay, so once it comes in contact with some food material and digestion begins, a peroxisome becomes a lysosome. Right, and then the yellow thing, Golgi apparatus. All right, do you have some memorization to do? Yes. Now, this Thursday, I'm not going to give you a cell diagram on your quiz and go name and give the function of all the parts. That'll be next week that I will do that. Okay? But know that that's coming. We haven't gone over what all the parts do in detail yet. That's tomorrow. Okay? So, you've got that stuff on the go. You have your microscopy lab due this Friday. Get working on it. Okay, I'm happy to give you some tips or pointers if you come in during nighttime, okay, or before school or at lunch or whatever. Okay, I'll look them over and give you some tips if you would like. Okay, all right.